Hey guys, welcome to Drop Balls and Big Calls, a podcast where we talk through the setbacks and the individual's comeback stories. The podcast where we sit down with people who have experienced life's big hits, made bold choices, and kept on showing up anyway. Today's guest in episode 1 is someone who's very close to me, Chris Ball. He's been basically a brother to me since I was 17 years old when we met in Christchurch. I couldn't think of a better person to join me on episode 1 than Chris, or Toolie, as he's known by his close ones. He's a guy who has experienced more loss than anyone ever should in life, but he keeps showing up. He's been to hell and back, but he still finds time to be funny, kind, and just an outright awesome bloke. So I really enjoyed this chat, and I hope you do too. So, Chris Ball, here we go. I met you back in Christchurch when we were both playing on the youth circuit with our band. So I would have been, 16, 17. But what do you remember of that time?
Well, mate, I mean, we were kind of, I think I wrote about this in did a band bio once. We were kind of the older imposters on the youth circuit. I think by that stage we were 2008, 2007, 2008, we were sort of 24 between us, 24, 23. So we're well past it. But it cut our teeth real well. I think my biggest memory from that time, to be really honest, was breaking into the back of my car when I locked the keys in after a show once. And Josh thinking that was the most hilarious thing. But for us, it was really formative because we'd come down from Nelson the year before, I think, and didn't really have any idea of where to start. And AJ at the time, one of the founding members of the band, happened to actually work in a youth group sort of thing as a youth leader. And he was like, there's this youth project thing, like it's meant to be for youth, but we could use it. So, we sort of did. But it was really formative because it was really relaxed. It was really fun. We were kind of, from that time from the band, it sort of gave us a real formative training, but it was nice to meet people. And that was our first real meeting of anyone in Christchurch outside of ourselves. I don't mean from band, just in general, because I only moved there in late 07, but really kind of 08 by the time you went home for Christmas kind of thing and all of that. So, and it was sort of that year that we, until we got on that circuit, when we actually started meeting people outside of our group of friends that happened to live there anyway. Do you know what I mean? So It was really good. It was nice and carefree, and we're meeting, people and all of that. And then we kind of rocked up with you guys, and we thought, oh shit, we're a little bit intimidated by these 17-year-olds, to be honest. We're like, they're all better than us, but that's not hard. They still are 20 odd years later, to be honest. Most 17-year-olds, they were still really, and we kind of rocked up with you guys. And to be honest, there was something kind of about all three of you that we were like, man, way more mature than we were at 17. They're more mature than we are at 24. And just, we're sort of like, that big city type vibe. But I kind of remember that. And then I remember, I don't know, it was 08, maybe it was 08, going to Southern Amp or something like that with you as well.
Yeah.
And heading around to your place and jumping in the van and your mum dropping us off and heading out to that as well. And I had a couple of my mates down from Christchurch down from Nelson. And yeah, good times those days.
Absolutely. I should have asked before we got into that. But how would you describe yourself to people who've never met you? Obviously, I know you, but how would you describe yourself to those that haven't met you before?
Probably differently now than I did back then, a bit more, I don't really know, maybe I like to think I'm sort of kind of heart, or at least I want the best for everyone. Also, what's the word? I suppose quite a deep sort of thinker, like what I present on the outside isn't necessarily what you get, you know what I mean? So not like that's not an integrity thing. It's just in terms of you could be it's probably a fault, to be honest, of mine, but you could be like a real bully to me for years and I'll still just show up and be kind to you. Do you know what I mean? And eventually you got to cut the rope somewhere, but you don't. I'm that kind of person. But I think now as well, I'd say I can be a leader, or I am a leader a little bit, and especially in the band sense, but also with things like my rugby league, being on the directorship of that. Hopefully, how I describe myself now, basically as a dad and a family man. That's literally probably my biggest definition now. Dad and family man.
Yeah. Sam said that your move to Christchurch way back then, I think in 2007 or 2008, changed everything for you, and you had a new start. You met your wife, Serena, and started carving your own life. What did that fresh start really mean for you at the time?
To be honest, Jono, who was the other founding member of my band, and AJ had both gone down to Christchurch, I wanted a year previous. Jono got a job and AJ just went down for probably similar reasons that I did. And I was sort of the last off the rank, and I'd just kind of come out of a I say long-term relationship, but now, when you're kids, it's a long-term relationship of a couple of years, sort of engaged and that kind of thing. And I think probably going back to your previous question, actually, I am someone that puts a lot into relationships and sort of probably misguided as to necessarily how someone is the way back, if you know what I mean. So as in like I'll full on, like put everything in and not necessarily take signs that someone isn't. But that was obviously the case, and that broke up, and I ended up basically staying with friends again, and I had my dog, and it wasn't an ideal situation. And I just thought, well, man, I've got to do something because these streets, I was going out like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, kind of to the pubs and that. And it's the same 4 pubs that you go to because it's Nelson, right? This was, working at the supermarket, which was great. And I'll touch on that later too. But I wasn't really making the most of life. And because they'd gone down there, I think I had the motivation. Like, I think they were the final kicker. Because I was like, well, the only thing I do have is my band, sort of. And they were like, yeah, we'll be interested if you actually come down. And I was like, well, what have I got to lose now? And then as I did, sort of like Sam probably said, it was hard initially, really hard, and loved them dearly, but moved into a flat with some friends that, you live together with some people you're probably better not to. And then was really lucky because family friends from mine from way back in Nelson that knew me before I was born, kind of thing, family, had a little cottage out in Kaiapoi, and it was just empty. So trying to sell it, it was between tenants. I couldn't find tenants for it. They were like, look, have that for stuff or rent. I think I was paying like $100 a week or something stupid. If that might have been $100 or something. I can't remember. It was real low. And I think that was the key. That part there was the sort of the key. So Sam actually, the one cool thing about that was that Sam and I were childhood best friends. We've been friends since we were 5 years old or 6 years old or something. But we'd never really spent any time together, much major time together, because we've been in different cities, sort of from leaving school. So like we would always catch up when each other was around, or Sam usually was back from his gallivanting around the world, but we hadn't spent real time in the same city together. And it was actually really nice for me that first year at Bushin, even though it was interesting. It was nice to have Sam at uni, and kind of go around. It was like a nice, I suppose, escape, and also a good way to really get into Christchurch, because he'd been there for a couple of years, or a year at least by then as well, I think. And kind of gone to uni and got a flat, and it was really nice kind of having him to actually just go out and like be mates again, rather than the kind of the quick catch up over a cafe, or like come in for a night of beers or whatever. And yeah, so that was really cool. And yeah, we got to play some Kaiapoi, but I think that was like the real kind of crux, because for a while I had to learn to be on my own. It was my first time having flatmates that I'd never met before as well. So sort of, learn who you are pretty fast, I suppose. And yeah, I think it was just that ability to, people say you fight or flight. In that case, I probably fought for too long in Nelson, and then just thought, it's time to flight, And
Talk me through, Nelson, because I don't think you and I have even talked a lot about your time up there, or even your upbringing.
Yeah.
I think for me, I obviously knew about losing your mate Richard. I think you're in your teen years at that time, and the impact that had on you. But typical males, we didn't talk about it a lot, when we were growing up. But you also lost both your parents. Maybe we'll go way back. Talk me through like your earliest childhood memories growing up in Nelson.
It was 184 years ago. It was like, Nelson was great, and it's obviously home, right? It's a pretty nice place to grow up to. What Nelson was then is pretty much what it is now, but with a few more real world or modern world problems now, I suppose. But it was sort of, that kind of, just that quintessential 80s New Zealand. And, me and my brother and sister, we lived in a house overlooking sort of the Nelson Haven there. If you've ever been to Nelson, there's a wee haven that's sort of blocked by a boulder bank out to the main sea, and you see the mountains. So we're always close to the sea. It's always been part of our life anyway. And we just spent, it was a safe community. You'd walk down to school, or it was obviously those old days where, come back later, come back at 9 o'clock and there's no cell phone. So you sort of, I'm guessing he's all right, that sort of environment. With mum and dad, we had a really good environment where obviously dad worked hard and mum sort of looked after the house, but there was no real, there's never any friction between them. We're always safe. We always felt safe. We always had everything we needed. And it was probably a good thing that we had, I've said this before, I had no idea, for instance, of, say, dad owning muscle farms and that, and because we weren't just given everything, if that makes sense. I remember once buying a cricket bat, and dad was quite honest and being like, well, you're a bit crap, so maybe we'll buy you this one. And you can practice with that. And then I wanted a better one than for my skill, which, to be fair, should have just been a log from a tree. But, and I remember Dad being like, well, I'll tell you what, you need to put it on lay-by and actually pay it off, rather than I'm not just going to buy it for you kind of thing. So there was that sort of attitude in the house, but it was mainly just adventures, man. Like, we went to not a country school, but a smallish school. It'd be like the equivalent of being, for those that know Canterbury, I suppose, like being here in Kaiapoi now. The schools here, not huge, not big, and just happy. Everyone knew each other, and Sam and I would go run amok somewhere, and my brother and his mate go run amok somewhere, and my sister and her mates, and then we would spend a lot of weekends at either two places, like often over in Golden Bay, which is still probably my spiritual home, where we had a batch and that, or in the Sounds. So before we even had the batch, Dad had a motor sailor, which is like a yacht, big concrete yacht. Wouldn't even want to sail it across the world, I wouldn't think. It's built like a brick shit house. But Dad would have sold that maybe 87, 88, something like that. So I was only 4 or 5 years old. Then we used to he used that as a mussel farming boat initially, so I don't know how that got on. And then he sold that and bought the batch in Golden Bay, and he had a bunch of land in the Sounds that he used as a base for mussel farming as well. And so our holidays and our weekends were either spent between Golden Bay or the Sounds. We were lucky that maybe Dad had a job that was slightly out of the, not necessarily out of the norm, but a bit more than, say, what Chris here does, just working in the office or whatever. We managed to get some really different experiences, I suppose, from a young age of, being dragged out of school to go fish off a barge while Dad was, or watching the bubbles, from Dad's scuba diving and going, "I'll watch the bubbles. If they stop, something's wrong." Like, great. I'm 8 years old, Dad. But yeah, so that kind of thing, and yeah, it's pretty idyllic, really. Can't really complain. And even Mum and Dad with their sickness later were kind of not necessarily unaware, but until it got bad with Mum, really bad, was sort of unaware, right? Like, they would have known that there was something going on, I would imagine, and in a way, that's quite a good thing, because it probably limited the stress levels as much as they could be. I guess.
And what about your mum? Was she sort of more of a stay-at-home mum?
I think she trained as a nurse, like, way back in the day. And she sort of did little stints where she would go back to doing a bit of it, but not necessarily, I don't think it was like hospital nursing by then. It was sort of like retirement care, like retirement homes and that kind of thing for a bit. She'd only ever do that sort of part-time, and I don't think it was necessarily a financial thing. I think it was just her kind of feeling like she was contributing again, or her self-worth in a way. But other than that, yeah, she was a stay-at-home mum. She was a school taxi driver and all of that kind of thing. Yeah, going to all the mums groups and all the school things and running the school fairs and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you mentioned your parents both got ill. Talk me through that, and when did you, I guess, first get the sense that something was wrong?
It's really hard to remember with Mum, to be honest. It was so long ago now. But I remember Mum being sick at some point before. So I want to say, I don't know the exact date, but it might have been 92, 93, 94, something like that. And she went down to Invercargill for some treatment or something, and then came back, and didn't really hear much of it. And then I sort of want to say mid-1996 is sort of when it started, I think, properly coming back, or at least if it hadn't gone away or whatever, it was like sort of like really kind of began to hit its gears, I suppose, and go from being something manageable to, this is a really bad situation, and then quite rapidly from there. So it was sort of mid-96. By April 97, she died, so early April. So I was very fast from that point, from then. But I could be, like I said, I was old, but probably a little bit naive to oldish, but to remember, a little bit naive to what was necessarily going on. So I don't necessarily remember that part of it. I way more clearly remember Dad. About 2000s, I would have been 17 or so. Then he came in and said, "Oh, look, I'm sick, and I'm not going anywhere just yet, but I might not live to see grandchildren," or something like that. Yeah, it would have been 2000, I think. And then 2002, mid-2002, he had passed on as well. I don't know enough about it again, but I think there was sort of some consensus that maybe he'd been sick for maybe at least a year beforehand or so, It's just sort of, he only noticed because, Mum had cancer, which is obviously horrible. What Dad had done sort of was, especially then, rare, very nasty. Obviously, cancer is nasty too, but even more nasty. And it was motor neurone disease, and effectively it, wastes away. Simple explanations of waste away is new muscles, right? I think it eats away at the cells that create your muscles, something like that. And you end up sort of losing bits, and you notice that little piece of his hand had become, the flesh out of it had sort of become flabby skin, and he was getting a bit like he couldn't loosen things on the boat the way that he used to, and all of that. And went to the doctor, and turns out he had this motor neurone disease thing. And like I said, the sort of the scope of it is, on average, is about 2.5 to 5 years or something like that, I think, for people that actually have it, and not curable, and well, it wasn't back then. I'm pretty sure it's still not. So yeah, and that was just, it was one of those things that I think the worst part of that was that you had this brilliant man that was kind of, mum and dad were both outdoorsy, right? But, mum would quite happily lie on the couch and read a book anyway for relaxation or watch TV. Dad wasn't really built like that. Like, he'd do it, but he was built to do the stuff that we do, go for beach walks and go out on the boat, and he didn't really have time to be sitting in his bed, and so he had this brilliant mind, but he couldn't, like, mum could still communicate right up until sort of her death, right? I remember the night before, I was sitting on mum's bed, and she picked up a bit, and I showed her a watch I bought and that kind of thing, and just talking away. With Dad, there was months of a talking machine, and pressing a button, like the Stephen Hawking way, to make the sound, or type out the sentence and make the sound. And he has this brilliant brain that's, this marine scientist and well-known, renowned marine scientist that should do something, be able to do something as basic as talk, and just lying there, can't even ask for a thing of water without everyone fussing over him. And I think, in a way, him and I probably became the closest we came then, because he told me then that I was kind of the only one that treated him like normal, even though I was rude and a bit flippant with him and stuff. But it was sort of like, that's what he liked, right? Because I was a teenager, and that's what teenagers are like. So it was that normality part. He'd be typing away on his machine or whatever, and people were doing, like, I do it now with everyone, being like, oh, I want a drink of water, try and guess what they're saying, and that, Whereas when I was there, I just completely ignore him, and he'd be typing away on his thing, and then it would sort of finally get the sentence out, and I'd be like, I want a cup of water, and there'd still be a pause, and oh, Jesus, I better get up and get him a cup of water, you know what I mean? And kind of do it just like it would be at home. And so I think he sort of felt like a shred of normality from that. Like, oh, he's ignoring me then, he's still ignoring me now. You know what I mean? So yeah, we used to sit there and watch a bit of, rugby and stuff together in that hospice, and it's probably in a way nicer. Like, it's why I struggle to remember mum, one, for the timeline, probably two, because of the formative time for me that it was, the trauma, but also the fact that I kind of wasn't really old enough to really spend one-on-one time with mum, like you were, but as a kid. By dad, I was still a teenager, but I was 18 or 19, I think it was. So just turned 19. So I was still old enough to be like, oh, how's it going? And discuss the rugby, or, like, what's going on with this or that, or, back when I was 13, it was like, well, I'm looking at my cool watch I bought, sort of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, there's about a 5-year gap in between, but probably less by the time you count the sickness part of it as well.
Fuck, man. In that time from when your mum got sick through to your dad passing, how did that affect the dynamic in the household, like particularly with your siblings and that? How did it affect your dad after your mum passed?
Well, it was really interesting, and I think about this more now. If you told me that at the time, I'd say I had no idea. But obviously, that was the first time, I think I wrote about this at one point, that was the first time I'd ever seen a grown man, especially a big, strong, well, I say big to me, a strong man cry outwardly, and I was like, well, what's going on here? Like, the dynamic between us didn't change, I don't think, we're still just siblings and that, and dad managed it well, and we're so thankful and lucky that we had this huge network of mum and dad had cultivated just this incredible friend group, that just basically took on where dad needed, basically, like, yeah, I'll take them for a night or two here or there, or, that kind of thing, and just dropping stuff around. And the very first days after mum died, I went to school that same week. So she died on the Sunday, and there's a bit of conjecture with me and my brother, but I think I went to school on the Tuesday. Things might be a bit later in the week, but because I think the funeral was was, I want to say, Wednesday or Thursday that week, but I definitely went to school that week. My third form year. So year 9 these days in New Zealand. And yeah, went to school that week. And then sort of, I think that might have been the way of kind of, I didn't cry at the funeral, that sort of thing, because it was that thing of like, oh, I'll be the strong one kind of thing, and I didn't really, to be honest, pay much attention to what Julia and Steve were doing. I just sort of, we're all in our own thing. I think that's the same for the others. I think they went back to school as well. Dad probably would have had the conversation with us and said what he wanted. It's probably some sort of normality for us, to be honest, of like, oh, at least I get to see my mates and go play rugby. Not quite that flippant about it, but do you know what I mean? It's when you're a kid, it's a nice little escape. And then, but it did get a little bit messy probably after that. It's something you sort of reflect on a bit now, where Dad ended up getting remarried. Like, especially for me, it was quite soon and quite, like I was probably still young. And I think what I should say here is that when that happened, because it leads into probably what we'll talk about later, with this stuff as well, I was a little bit delayed, can you tell, in terms of developmentally, in terms of like maturity and learning and stuff. I mean, I think, I'm not saying that's fact, but I'm pretty sure I was. So, as in where you might be a 13-year-old, I might have been at sort of an 11-year-old capacity, if that makes sense, kind of the deal, right? So, with this happening, and then just turned 14, and then sort of 6 or 7 months later, the dad and my stepmom are, in a relationship, and it sort of opened up to us, and we're told about it, that kind of thing. And then in '98 they got married, but there would have been obviously a period between the wedding and that. And I sort of regret how I acted then, in a way, because you look back as an adult now, right? And you go, well, it's just someone trying to be happy again, and but you're young and you're a kid, right? So you just act the way that you act at the time, and especially a teenager, your brain doesn't work at all, does it? I remember sort of, I don't know if Sue actually knows this, our lovely stepmom, she was great, still is a great person, but at the time I've always regretted this. I still remember exactly where it was when it happened, and Dad told us in the car that he was getting married, and I remember sort of being like, "You're not getting married. You're not marrying that woman." Blah blah blah. And I think at one point I even called Sue and said, "You're not getting married." Like you look back at that now and you go, "What the fuck is a 14-year-old kid?" Like having his head entitles him to say that, but you're just young and dumb and going through your own stuff. And I probably thought it was probably the time frame being quite soon. But again, you reflect on that, and I go, well, Mum and Dad were only together, I think, 9 months before they got married. It's just that older sort of school way of doing things, right? And you look back at it now, and we're really lucky after that. Like it did settle down. It was hard for everyone, and settled in. It wasn't necessarily the easiest journey, but that's just part of life. Sue did her best, and Dad did his best, and Dad kind of got dealt at that blow as well. And I've always felt a bit sorry for Sue from that end as well, because when he got dealt the blow was probably when things were settling down a bit in terms of that whole forming the new family and beginning to, set our own business and all of that. Sort of then you lose your husband, right? And these other kids as well that you sort of, 2 years into nurturing a relationship with, or whatever it is. And yeah, always felt a bit sorry for that. But that was a different sort of, definitely up and down, like a roller coaster ride for that. But now I'm really thankful for it. I would have rather that had happened, for instance, than Dad just stayed single, and especially, he couldn't have chosen better in choosing.
Do you think at the time he was just really struggling to be on his own as well?
I think so. I do. I've always, obviously I never really got to talk to him about it, because even 18, 19, you don't want to know about that kind of thing. You're sort of just interested in finding the next pub, I suppose. But I think maybe that alone himself, and maybe looking for that. Well, like I've had a wife for 20 years and now I don't, And I've also wondered that, obviously, I'm not saying in any way that it was a strategic decision. You obviously loved his wife, right? But I mean, there was probably a little bit of him going, well, shit, there's also 3 boys in the house, and I've got, this young girl, my sister would have been 11, 12 years old at that time, really needs some, some female influence, through her teen years as well, kind of thing. And, as well as the obvious, things that go with getting married, finding someone and all of that. At that stage, Mum was 50, and so she was a little bit older than him, so he would have only been late 40s, and that's not that far away from me, and going, well, shit, we've got the next 40 years to spend on my own. Obviously, it didn't pan out that way, but who knows? I sort of was something I'd probably like to have talked to him about now, but let's talk to other people about it, I suppose.
What was it like those last couple of months with him, and then following his passing? you'd obviously lost both your parents at this point. You're only 17 or 18 years old. That's a lot, man, for someone in their formative teenage years to come out of in a small place. Yeah. How do you reflect on that? What was it like for you?
It is funny because I say all of that, but even in that period from 97 to 2002, whenever it was still a really happy time, right? Like there was still so much happiness, and all of a sudden we gained these step brothers and sisters as well, and there was more people to kind of, experience stuff with in that too. But even out of that, just dealing with it, we had so many friends, and we were so busy with our schooling and that. And I think I can't speak for Julia and Steve, but from my perspective, I was kind of naive to the world anyway. Like, okay, that's happened. There's probably this trauma response that I'll talk about later, where you kind of go into this functioning thing and you're all functioning, but it's almost like blacked it out, if you know what I mean, in terms of your actual brain power, and you just kind of continue on. And then the year when Dad died, it was really clear. I'd actually gone down. It was my first year out of school, and I'd gone down to Greymouth on a outdoor recreation, I say degree. Let's be honest, it was a certificate in learning how to guide a boat, basically, or mountain climb. But it was a lot of fun, and you stayed in a hostel down there, and Dad would still urge us to go. Be like, you're only in Greymouth if, starts to happen then or whatever kind of thing. And I'd spent some time at school before that actually working in a supermarket, part-time job and that kind of thing. And then went to do this course, and I was living in a hostel, and it actually, this all leads to it basically it's a big thing, but if you remove the Dad thing out of it, it was one of the best years of my life, especially back then. Like, I your first part-time job out of school kind of thing, and then you're living with these new people in a hostel, and there's, you're doing the uni thing, but obviously in Greymouth and in an ex-nursing hostel. It's not quite university, but close enough, right? And you're all common people doing outdoor stuff, going out to the pub and living in a hostel and turning pranks on each other and all the stuff that you do when you're young and dumb. There was that side of it. And then I was really lucky, and I'm still really thankful to him today, that the boss of the supermarket that I sort of worked at the time was just so good about everything. And he kind of, when I came back, I probably got a call about 2 to 3 weeks before Dad got, before it actually happened, saying like, it's going to be a matter of weeks now kind of thing. And so the Polytech and that were all really good. And we're like, look, just take time. We'll try and sort it out at the end of the course. And the supermarket that I worked at, during school part-time was really good. And he was like, look, do you want a full-time job for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it was? So just made some work for me basically and kept me busy and, give me some money while I was up there kind of thing, and really supportive. And he, that was really good. Like, that's the clearest thing I remember. And then, obviously it sort of happened and it was hard and stuff, but I suppose the difference with terminal illness is it's coming, right? As opposed to, so it's a very different feeling. In some ways it can be a strain, but it also gives you a bit of time to accept it, rather than someone's just ridden the car off and you're talking to them 5 minutes ago. Do you know what I mean? It's a very different sort of vibe. And so by then it's obviously sad, but there's a bit of relief going on in that. But what really, I still remember this really clearly, and it was probably the first time I shed a tear in my eye, was when we were at the funeral a few days later with Dad, and 4 or 5 or 6 people from my course who I'd only met, this was in May, sort of mid to late May, and I only met them in March or whatever it was, all came, didn't know Dad, didn't know anyone from Burrow Soap, made the trip from and they're all from around the country, made the trip from Greymouth up to Nelson and went to the funeral. And you're like, and then the weeks afterwards, I was sort of fiercely protective of me, and it felt really like you belonged, I suppose. Like, while this thing had happened, good thing out of it was that it brought, everyone really tight within our course, I suppose. The nature of the course that we were doing, you were tight anyway, because, and literally, without exaggeration, your life could depend on them if you were, like, you were learning the skills, but as you got more and more complicated, you were still paddling a grade 4 rapid or something, here and there. If you got it wrong, then, it could. It's a bit of a far stretch, but, you were earning trust in those kind of exercises like they do with out and round and that kind of thing, right? And so you're a close group anyway, and then having them there was pretty incredible. And I think that worked as almost a distraction in a way, being away, because for that year and having that to go back to, kind of being like, wow, sort of all over now. And remember my friend Will came up as well, and he drove back down. I think he drove back down with me, back down to the hostel, and so it wasn't like I had this big 4-hour subfestive, and that was a time you alluded to earlier where you just didn't talk about stuff. Subfest was a subfest, and you're like, you don't talk about that. It's tough enough. But that distraction, like I said, I still stand by it. Both 97 as well was, except for that, a really good year. Except for that, I think that's quite a big except for, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Do you feel like you've done that a lot over the years? Just sort of swept it. Like my observation of you is you tend to laugh a lot of things off, right? Is that sort of how you kept dealing with it over the years?
I think I did to a point until it started kind of accumulating, right? Like mum and dad, and it kind of is what it is. Like there was nothing I could do, and you at this stage, I was still quite like, I guess, bitter about it. But I think, like I said, you got that thing of having the months and the years beforehand of going like, this is going to happen. You almost begin to, almost by the time you've gotten there, you've grieved, right? If once it gets in a way, and you've kind of gone, okay, now it's time to sort of, it sounds cold, I don't mean it this way at all, but it's sort of like time to move on. Like, not move on, but move on with your life. Remember, there's actually an incident later on with my friend AJ, and when the band was still in Nelson later on, he asked me to be there at the hospice the night that his dad was passing away. I remember when it happened being accidentally really cold about it. Just being like, oh, well, we just needed to make sure, it's just happened, blah, blah, blah. And my first response was, oh, we just need to record the time of death. Rather than like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, mate. Let's go have a beer, have a hug, whatever. It was like, or have we recorded the time of death? Like, it was just that responsive. And I think, to be honest, the band is probably what helped me pull that apart, and to then not sweeping it under the rug. And the stuff that happened slightly later, because I don't think there was depression as such. It was just stuff that happened. And like I said, that trauma response kicked in. It was almost like not a reality, if you know what I mean, in your head, like it was, but it wasn't. And then you kind of just keep on keeping on. But then as it accumulated, like I said, and these other things started happening, that's when it eventually everyone's got a breaking strain. Right?
Well, what did that look like?
It probably had manifested quicker anyway, like I said. So in that, when I got back from that year in Greymouth, this is where it sort of probably started going a bit, not awry, but I just wasn't doing much. So I went back to that supermarket I talked about, started working full-time there. I was really thankful that I did because, like I said, Mark still to this day is like a huge mentor, and was huge. I don't think people realise the influence he had, and the help that he kind of gave me. It was just working there full-time, and then looked at sort of starting a teaching degree, but didn't really take it seriously and kind of wanted to go and make friends in that. And I think part of it was like, it was just that thing of being in small town Nelson. You were going out a Thursday and a Friday and a Saturday, and you played touch with your mates, and you did that, and that was great, a great life. But then you kind of go, after 3 years, is it a great life? And being a little town like that, as stuff starts accumulating, it keeps accumulating, and you're kind of trapped in it. And though eventually you just like, I think I wrote in a piece that I wrote about it. It wasn't like I was spiraling out of control. I just wasn't making the most of life. My mates were gallivanting around the world, or they're at university, or they were, so, and there was somebody there, obviously. I could look at them and be like, and my brother and sister were around the world doing stuff. I was like, I'm just stuck in Nelson doing, it wasn't a dead-end job, but for want of a better word, dead-end job kind of thing. And like, what do I do now? And then it sort of got, a little bit of self-worth, got the girlfriend and that, and they're like, well, maybe I'll go and follow up the teachers college stuff and all of that. And like I said, just probably didn't take it seriously. And a lot of that is probably because of those things we talked about, right? Like, just being like, there's probably a response in hindsight to what happened, instead of spiraling out of control and drinking and going angry, I just didn't concentrate on stuff, and it was like, I'll make more friends and add more people to my life rather than actually take administrative stuff or stuff I need to do or I should do seriously. Like, I'd study, but not really. No.
You've mentioned music a few times now, like as being like a key outlet for you in that time. When did music start showing up for you?
I'd actually started at my last year of high school, to be honest, but I was not seriously. Like, I was a rugby league kid. I was just like, oh yeah, my mates and I'd made were into a band at youth group, and I was like, well, I'll be part of that. So I was, and they didn't really know what we were doing, but then I just kind of kept at it. Like, it was something that AJ was into, and I think what it did do is that we spent, what I probably didn't neglect to say back then was that we spent a lot of time, AJ and I, for instance, between that period that I'd come home from Greymouth, sort of the cool thing, wasn't cool at all. The thing to do amongst my mates was to like write lyrics and stuff, right? And that whole emo period. And we used to drive around, and we played this game where we had a coin, and it was heads or tails flip. flip the coin, and we'd just take like heads was right and left was left, heads was, tails was left or whatever, and AJ would just flip the coin and we'd go whichever way it was. But while we were at it, we'd come up with like one-liners, and then they became like lyrics for songs and that. And we were like, we should sort of do something with this. And AJ had been playing in a youth group band for a bit, so he had, I think, I don't know what his musical story was, but he knew how to play bass, or he'd learned bass something. So he'd been playing in a band, and we were like, well, we should put a band together. And I didn't even know how to play guitar, but you know, who needs guitar? Who needs lessons? Who needs to know stuff? So you at the time, just get it done. And probably why it took us 17 years to get even known. It takes every other band with this old 5 years, So, but we started from a lot further back, right? So yeah, and I think that was probably the formation of it. Maybe that is how I was able to move on. Well, outwardly move on, like by writing these down. And in a way, I'd written this. I alluded to it again in that piece I wrote a few years back. I had this notebook that I'd written. It's quite a grim notebook, actually. Not in terms of I hate myself and want to die, but just full of lyrics that are, why do you hate me? Why has God done this? It's on me. I'm an omen and all this stuff. And that's where it all started. And then, yeah, just sort of, just nothing better to do, basically. Bored and into it. And then it became an outlet, I think, is the point. It started as a fun thing to distract it, and then it became an outlet for everything that sort of followed with that.
Yeah. It was mentioned from someone close to you that people perhaps didn't show up in the way that they should have back then. And has that had an impact on, like, perhaps how you trust people now, how you react to certain situations?
Yes and no. I think, like, I do take rejection pretty hard, I guess. And back then especially, right? Because it was like another thing that was like, but at the same time, I had so many people, other people showing up for me that kind of cancelled it out. Like all these amazing family and friends and stuff that were kind of cropping up, you were able to kind of put that aside because you're like, well, that person, whilst I probably like them more than they did me or whatever, like I was probably let myself get treated a bit like a doormat in a way. I'm just that kind of person. But eventually you find a backbone, right?
Yeah. It was also suggested that people do, you've actually just touched on it there, where people perhaps at times take advantage of your kindness. Like, do you feel that that's true? And now that you say you've developed a backbone, what is, how do you show up for yourself and those things?
I think it is true in a way, but only some people. You can't trust everyone in life. Some of them in particular, one in particular, I don't know who you've spoken to, but if it's this person talking about themselves, got quite a storied history together. He's sort of done a lot to, sorry, it's not in the background. He's done a lot to change that himself. But even stuff like just actually being able to be like, look, there's this thing I actually read last year. It's a bit of a phenomenon, something just called let them, and just go, okay, let them. Like, it's not, and I think as I got more confident in myself, a lot of it was through the band, a lot of that sort of stuff, right? And as I got more confident and as we started ticking off the achievements, I didn't need validation. I had this whole need for validation of, because I hadn't defined my story. I had the story I wanted to write, but I wasn't able to do it because I wasn't any good in terms of the instruments and stuff. But then once it started getting noticed and we started getting a little bit of, notice and respect and stuff, that's what I wanted in the first place. So that's kind of all I needed. And then once I got that, it was more of a, like eventually you just don't take crap. I think that was through the band is how I learned to kind of stand up for stuff, because I spent quite a lot of time, probably from our first headline show, defending the band. Because before that, I didn't really care. Like I knew we were used to us back then. Like we'd take it seriously, but we were also a bit of a hodgepodge. It was more fun than seriousness. And once we started getting headliner shows and stuff, once you do that, you're a bit more in the limelight, aren't you? And people want to start giving their opinions in that. So my job by then you go, well, shit, you've got a brand as well and a story that I've got to protect rather than just me. Like, if it's just me, that's somebody that I like, I don't really care. But it was at these people that had taken my story and worked really hard on it for years and that kind of thing. And so it's sort of my job, I suppose, to defend that. And you just, in the end, something breaks and you just do it, And kind of once you've done it once, I think you realise, actually, no, 40 now, we're probably adult now. The imposter syndrome's gone. And just, I think there is something in that too. I think something in being 40 or 30, like I don't think your ages do help. You just get to a point where you're like, I'm an old man now. No, but I've just got better shit to worry about, Two little boys out there I can hear screaming away, that matter more than Facebook,
Is imposter syndrome something you've had to deal with quite frequently over the years?
There's the band especially, but even now, like, so I'm on that rugby league board down here, like a little local provincial one, and there are people that, at one point, there was a guy that was high up in the International Cricket Council was sitting on it. I'm like, mate, I did cabbage maths and went to outdoor rec and PE for my 7th form year, and I'm sitting here with you because I played a year of rugby league. Like, okay, but you sort of learning it, and in the band, 100%. Because I still don't, I can't really sing, can't play. I can play about 4 chords on the, maybe more than that, 6 or 7 chords on the guitar. Still, that's about it. And you're sitting there and you're opening with the Dead Kennedys, who kind of, one of the American founders of punk, right? Like, obviously it was around, but you're like, how the fuck did this happen? Oh, I shouldn't be here. But yeah, it's definitely something that, but I think once you kind of bite the bullet and you face that fear, then, because once I played with the Dead Kennedys, that was a really good thing for me, because I used to get super nervous. I used to care so much what people thought. And after that, I was like, mate, I've done this to, there's many people now, whatever. Like, it'd be the same for you with your endeavors in music, even bigger and stuff. And like, well, okay, I've played to 5,000 people now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm playing in a small room to 30 and they think I'm loser, then I don't care. You've already shown them a loser in front of 1,000 people. Like, it's that kind of context, I suppose.
Yeah. We'll come back to Southern Zone Rugby League, because I think that'd be really cool to touch on. But obviously we talked about moving to Christchurch and the sort of transformation that provided for you in your life. There's been, from what I've seen, sort of 2 constants in that time. One being your band, the Snake Behaviour, and number 2, your wife, Serena, who came along sort of 2 or 3 years after you moved there, from what I recall. We'll start with the band. So obviously you and AJ had started things back in Nelson, and then you moved to Christchurch, playing on the youth circuit. And then over the years, you've gone through a number of transformations as a band. Yeah. How do you reflect back on your journey with the Snake Behaviour?
I mean, like, I still struggle with the word calling myself a musician. It's just, anyone who goes, oh, you're a musician, and I'm a jock. They just faked it, I still think that, like, what I did learn to do was become more of a people manager and put the right people that might have believed in my story, I suppose, or people that had a bit of faith in me, put them in to get the result that maybe I wanted. Like, people like Michael Gibbs, for instance, watching him evolve, but he's fiercely loyal and just go through it together kind of thing. And then became to the point where he was trying to, other bands trying to poach him, and, he's in a couple of bands kind of thing, because he's, he gone from being that to saying nothing at all at the start. And like, I think, like, I needed it as a way to not quit, but there were times where I just thought, you know what, like, all the dramas now are too hard myself, and I'm no good at this, but I enjoy it. I enjoy just making the music and telling my story. And it wasn't until we sort of got those bigger shows and that I actually realized maybe my story is a little bit different. Like, I know there's people that got it way harder than I've ever had it. They just will not understand. But maybe I do have a little bit of something that I can tell. And I realized that it was a tool, and maybe I should keep going. And we kept getting, like, these lineup changes would come in and out. And then it was actually around the time that you were sort of filling in for us, obviously. And we met Samuel for the first time, and he had been in bands before that and was like, no, we've got an actual proper work ethic here, boys, no, just mucking around, like, if you want to take it seriously. And I think that was, so meeting Michael was a key, meeting Simon was a key, having you fill in, I think, was a key for us as well. I'd be like, oh, that's the level, we're way out for that, but it was good because we're like, we kind of need that. And then Samuel coming along was sort of that last piece of the puzzle. Then we're like, actually, we take this slightly seriously, but you'd still have there's lots of ups and downs. Like, it wasn't really till 2016, 17 that we met. Throughout probably 2015 and 16, we met a lot of good people in the scene, and we just think by not going away, by stickability, it kind of just got accepted finally. Like, saying, they're still here. It's just, it can't be them, just join them. So we're kind of like on bills and that. And then late 2016 and that, we sort of started making more and more friends. There's a couple of single release shows that were set up for us. In 2017, we met what is now Emeka, but they were full of them back then. And that probably ended up being the catalyst that took us to that next level again, because one of the guys from that had done touring and he'd done, in that scene, he knew how it worked. He chucked us on a couple of little shows, and then we repaid the favour and then became good friends. And the next year, we're playing back-to-back. That was a big thing for us, back-to-back nights. And then it's sort of high from there, but I do reflect on it in a people way, sort of sadly in a way, You do see the best and the worst of everyone, right? Myself included, yeah. Because there's a lot of ego involved and there's a lot of personal, especially in my context where a lot of what I was writing about was very personal stuff. So it was like, no, this needs to be the story, Everyone's going, well, I'm putting time into this too. And there was a big thing on me to sort of, I remember the band actually coming to me and saying this, and being like, it's always been true, it's your band, it's always this, it's always that, it's always that, And so there was a lot on me to kind of, I suppose, skin myself in a way, learn from it and change it. And I think I did. Perhaps what happened after that is I did too much and it became kind of the other way, right? Like just with like, it would sort of be like, I kind of gave over everything, but then the imbalance would come somewhere else in the band. But that's so really, to be honest, reflecting on it so far, there's like, I was so consumed by keeping it going and not quitting, and I had a chip on my shoulder. And as soon as that chip on the shoulder left, it just became so much more fun. Probably around the time Oliver was around, or even just slightly before that, once we got the Dead Kennedys and that 2017, we just wanted respect. And I felt like then we got it, because we got it from our peers, not just people turning up. And then, like, there's just been a ride ever since, and it got to that point where didn't want to quit, still haven't, but I'm kind of like, well, if no one wants to do it this year, then it's just what it is. 5 years ago I would have been crushed. Like, I'd taken it personally. And, these people, hate me and blah, blah, blah. So now I'm like, well, people got other stuff to do, It's life. It's just a maturity thing, I think. I think I needed it. Like, I think without that, I often wonder that. It could have been very different. But it has affected me in other ways as well. Like, it's affected me. I was very outdoorsy. And now I'm, wider than I am tall. Because I don't see the two as conducive, really. Like, you're staying up late, playing gigs till 2 in the morning kind of thing. It's then hard to get up at 5 in the morning and go for a run, or go like, I'm going for tramping up Mount Grey today or whatever, It just doesn't happen. So, yeah.
So there's obviously the teaching side, and for what it's worth, I think you'd be great as a teacher. You're great with kids, but the second thing, obviously, is you're still passionate about muscle farming as well. Like I see your posts on LinkedIn about that, and obviously your dad was a muscle farmer, and obviously there's the sporting side where you're on the board for Southern Zone Rugby League. Do you ever envisage a version of your life going down one of those tracks?
Yeah, this is the thing. I just kind of come into this stuff too late. I'm like the person that has a good idea about 20 years too late, if you know what I mean. I'm like, I probably should have done that. After I was on that course in Greymouth, I probably should have thought about it and gone, well, I'm not particularly academic, so it's probably not the best outlet for me. But hey, I could go sort some good muscles from bad ones, and just work your way up. Do you know what I mean? Especially as that supermarket I talked about earlier, one of the silent partners was one of Dad's old sort of muscle farming friends, and is now full time, doing that, and has got a big sort of empire's the wrong word, but like a big enterprise doing that. So it would have been, you had the contacts right there, and probably that imposter syndrome, or even just that need to, at that time, being in that state where you're like, well, I can't reach, do that. I've backed myself to do it. And now it's a bit of a thing of like where to start. So I'm sort of toying with a few ideas actually in the agriculture space, which is sort of what, even though it's a funny link to make, sort of what the board thing was about too, was sort of trying to find some skills about running a strategic business and, developing that way personally. So that's what that part of it was about. For me, being like, well, if I can get on this, maybe I can learn from some people that run businesses and, at a higher level than just like being a plan in it. So maybe one day I can run my own muscle farming or own agriculture business or something. But there's obviously the side to it with the rugby league that I love rugby league so much. So you just want to give something to it, and you don't have the time capacity to go coach these days, on a Saturday or Sunday and all that takes. But what it can do is sort of be the player voice with these people that don't necessarily know the game but are brilliant at the other parts of it. Hopefully contribute to that, and hopefully contribute to making it really healthy down here. That's the main ingredient. Like, what I want for it is separate, but that was the initial motivation, and it becomes about going, well, actually I really want to do something for the game and grow it, and you watch it and it's just taking off.
It's amazing to see the turnaround in rugby league in New Zealand from afar. Like for me, growing up playing it over there, there would be times where we'd be lucky to field four teams in a junior comp, and then even when I was playing a bit of Premier grade before I moved, obviously I get it was post Quakes as well, in that really sort of weird period for Christchurch, but it was so hard for teams to get players.
Yeah, we were, when I was first 13 player at college, Nelson College, it's not strapped for cash, and then you'd rock up and you'd be like, oh, actually, your game's in Takaka. Like, oh, cool, that's 2 hours away. Like, you rocked up to the local field. You're like, okay. So, there was about 3 teams, and one of them was run by the gangs. So you're like, great. So it's sort of like wonderful, and now you see how it is, right? It's great. So it's established like all of the unions, and then not just the unions, but you've got like Southern Zone overarching that, and then you've got NZRL and the whole structure, and it's just the game is just taking off, and just being one small part of it is so good.
Yeah, it's really cool, and obviously the we're probably riding on the coattails of the Warriors' sort of success in recent times as well.
Yeah, obviously, like the place in Christchurch is just packed, sold out twice.
Definitely, a new stadium on the way too, so that's really exciting. Yeah, Serena.
As you met at work.
How'd you meet?
At another supermarket. So in that time I got a house from the family friends, I sort of was a little bit down on my luck and still living off the student allowance and stuff, even though you weren't going and that kind of thing. And Sam had actually been really good, contributed earlier, and was at student job search, and I'd get a bit extra money because he'd be like, oh, I've got this big job, can you come and help me? And we'll split the cash kind of thing and that sort of thing. But then I sort of fallen into a rut, and another friend, people of the daughter of the people that actually owned the house, was sort of staying there briefly one weekend, and I came in and it had like this big mezzanine, and there were these suits hanging off of the mezzanine. I was like, what the hell are these about? And they were just like op shop suits. I wasn't even going to wear, But it kind of gave me the thing like, I need to go get a job. So I just started applying again at supermarkets and that, right? And then that lessened the burden of having no money. So you were like, oh, cool. I actually met Serena in the deli at the supermarket. She'd come back from traveling, and sort of got on and that, and obviously the rest is history. Interesting little anecdote to it is that her brother and his wife also met in the same deli. Yeah, so something in the water, eh? But yeah, so that was 2009, long time ago.
Yeah, wow, that's one. Long time ago. Yeah. You're making me feel old saying things like that. So one thing that I always paid attention to when you guys were together, like, she really lifted you, I think maturity-wise. But I just think the two of you balance each other out really well. But you're also both very passionate about your animals as well, and particularly, and Sam Taylor actually identified this as well, where even during the quakes, you were opening your home to others and helping, dogs and raising money for them. And I just remember there always being animals in your house throughout that period, and along with your own. And even if they couldn't find them a home, you would take some of them for yourselves. What drove that generosity at that time?
Arena. No, like I had Polo, who I wanted a dog, and Nelson, that sort of towards the end of being in Nelson, and I went and got him, and actually came down here to Christchurch to get him, and and then when their relationship and all that went bad, and he was living in the kennels and that, and like you say, when Serena and I got together, the same passion for animals, I suppose, and it was just that, I don't know how it happened, but Serena saw it. Serena's the same. She's like even more so. She's like the go-getter part of it, like the actual doer part. I'm like that'd be nice to do. I should do that, but not actually do it, where she's like, I'll just send them a message, and kind of one thing led to another, and before we know it, we've got that going on. And but I think it's just, maybe it's from what you go through there as well, that you learn that everyone and everything has a place and a meaning, and there's no need to be like, even if you're a hunter, for instance, if you're hunting animals and you hunt for meat, that's fine, but there's no need to be cruel to it while you're hunting for it. That sort of, I suppose, philosophy. Do you know what I mean? Like, just because it's an animal, it doesn't mean it's less important. And there's just dogs in that needed a home, and we're like, well, someone's got to do it. It was because we saw a picture of this little puppy, and I think we'd done like a little bit of fostering, and like I said, Serena had figured out like with someone and seen it, and was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And we'd done one puppy at that stage, I think, or two maybe. And then we saw this, we'd sort of given up on it a bit, and I saw this dog and this little puppy in its last day at the pound. And I said to Serena, I'm just going to go and pick it up. Whether they give it to me or not, I'm just going to go and, we'll find a home for it ourselves. I'm not having it dead because it got abandoned for no reason. Just sort of went and picked it up, and then at the same time, it turns out that another one of the organisations had seen it and done the same thing. And then so Serena was like, I think we met into it or whatever, and Serena got in touch with them, and they got in touch with us, and then so we did a bit of work for them for a while as well. At the same time, we had Pepper, who was a story in herself. But Yeah, and I think she taught us a lot. She was kind of the catalyst, not the catalyst for it, but kind of the enabler in that, like, she was so placid and so gentle that you felt comfortable having other dogs in the house without it causing any issues, you know. So it sort of made whereas before that with Polo and that, it was kind of like he was a little bit aggro. It was kind of like, well, it's not a good time, and you know, yeah, yeah. So it's just, I think, like you say, it's just Serena's like got the passion for the animals as well, and actually will do this stuff, you know.
Yeah. When did you start talking about kids?
Probably quite late on because we were like probably initially quite early on, but then money and stuff was a issue, and then we were like, and then we wanted to build, and we were like, well, better build a bigger house, and then probably more seriously, sort of only just before COVID, really, you know, like 2018, 2019 kind of thing. And voila, what do you know, one of them turned up. Yeah, just
Just arrived at
arrived,
the
opened the
doorstep.
door one day, and there it was. Better take him in as well. But it changes it, doesn't it? Like, completely. You know that now, being a parent yourself. And it's your first one, especially, is the one that changes everything, isn't it? Like, you go from being, because all of a sudden it's not about you, like everyone says, you know, like it's about, oh, actually, there's this other little dude and kind of he needs help and he needs, you know, and then it's also not about you, but it's also not about, like, especially from the man's perspective, like, it's not even about you in terms of a little bit, but in terms of actually nurturing the baby, like all of a sudden it's not just the baby you're looking after, but it's such a hard road for the mum that you've got to be like making sure that you're on top of that as well. And plenty of times that you drop the ball on that, right? Like, but then plenty of times that you just do what you got to do. Yeah. And I think people always say it's a complete cliche that you don't really know what love is until you have your own kid. And then you're like I think Dave Grohl said it best, like, holy shit, I would like just die for this thing over it. You know what I mean? Like, I was Ryan Reynolds, you know, I'd use my wife's human shield to protect this, you know. That's what he says. You're kind of like, oh yeah, okay, like, it's that sort of thing. I'm like, holy crap, yeah. It just changes you completely, right? Like, and it gives you, for me, it probably gave me that meaning back. Like, I wanted to build a family from a really young age because of that, and I think that might have been a way to be like, well, it broke, so let's build it again. So instead of, yes, it, you know, various things didn't transpire that way, and now it did, and it's kind of like that is now your legacy. But then with that also comes like, holy shit, I better do a good job, you know, and I don't want to screw them up. And you can screw them up by being too involved and too nice as well, right? Like, the one thing it has done is it did probably bring up a bunch of those feelings again around mortality and dad and stuff, being like, well, shit, dad died at 53 and mum died at 50. I think when I had Serena had Oliver, I was 37, 38, you know, and that kid could be 13 without me. I don't want that to happen again, you know. And you sort of, and I look at it now and I go, every birthday, like, how's he 5? There's this visual was coming up to be 5, you know, and there's this visual thing of like, man, time is going so fast. Where you go, oh, time goes fast, but you just keep going, and now you got this visual thing that was this big, and now it's eating all these wheat bits and driving its mum nuts, you know. So you're kind of like, wow, time's up. Yeah.
It was actually said by someone close to you that there's been times where you can't picture yourself living past 50. And that really hurt me, especially, you know, you'd mentioned the mortality part, like when you have a kid there, like that is one part that terrifies me as well. I think just having a kid in general is terrifying at times, particularly when they're first born. What's it like carrying that, man? Like that, I mean, feels pretty heavy.
It sucks. It's probably something I should probably do about. Something I should do something about. And I did for a while when I had the band. You know, I was writing Reaper and stuff, and it went away for a long, long time. I actually wrote about that, and then I'd go to sleep crossing my fingers that I was going to wake up. You know, but it's more now. It's just at times when, like, I've let myself get too low, or I'm too tired. I've gone, shit, like, you know, I'll be up late at night and be like, oh my God, I'm 42. Even before this, it's like, man, even if I have good innings, it's only like I'm halfway through my life already, you know? Like, and if I only live to mum, not like less than 10 years left, you know? This is your natural response, but then I snap out of it because I'm so busy. Or a kid comes through me, I won't leave her. But I think with them, it's more highlighted because you're like, well, you know, I want to make sure, like, I see Serena's parents around and they're healthy and well, and the kids have their grandparents, you know, they can do stuff. And I'm like, well, I hope that's the same for me. Like, I don't want to be, you know, 80, 90. And I suppose I haven't really dealt with it yet. Like, it just pops into my head at all different times. I remember, I didn't really realise, but a couple of years ago I was on the yacht with my brother and I was telling him all these stories about musicians and stuff, and fascination with them, and all of the musicians I talked about had died. And he's like, "You're quite fascinated with death, aren't you?" I'm like, "I wouldn't say I'm fascinated by it. It's just that's where the stories come from, but maybe there's something in it, where it's like sort of affiliate more with that because of the other side of it. Like, it's quite scary. It freaks me out a lot, and I think sometimes it gets in the way of a lot of stuff, like work in that too, But it's be like it will happen anyway all the time. It's probably happened about 3 times in this podcast, to be honest. Just go straight in your mind and then just straight out, And yeah, it's just keep on. It goes out before it's come in, and you kind of just go, "Oh yeah, well, I'm still breathing," But I do also think that part of me goes, "Well, it also is where you are in life. Like, if I'm doing well in life, you're financially good or whatever, it's kind of less stressful. You're like, well, at least if it does happen, then I'm leaving my kids something. But if you're still developing and still working, you're like, well, shit, I'm out of here, and wifey's got nothing, and the kids have got nothing, and so there's that part of it too. Yeah. To be honest, I don't know if I have dealt with it.
It's a lot, man. Like, even what you touched on there, you're constantly thinking about work, obviously caring for the little ones, the financial aspect as well, which is something, I wrestle with as well. And at the same time, trying to keep that relationship going with your wife or your fiance and be there for them. And then you're also trying to, find that little bit of time for yourself to be able to either deal with those things or dream a little bit yourself and find that something that's just yours. How do you balance those things? Because it's something I personally really struggle with.
It's the problem is it's become like a bad habit. Is I stay up way too late at night, way too late. Before kids used to happen in the morning, and I'd get up early enough and be like, I'd have an hour or two to myself, because I'm going to go to work. And now, by the time you get the kids to bed, and then you watch a bit of TV and you get your stuff sorted out or whatever, I'm frequently up to 1 o'clock in the morning because it's the only time that I get, But then the kids don't sleep well, and you're up at 5:50, and you're wondering why you feel like crap the whole time. One of the things this year with having a bit of a break from the band is I'm beginning to be like, well, maybe I just need to go out, a bit. I'm going to go from there and do stuff. Yeah, it's sort of, like maybe I need to go back to doing that stuff that I actually did love. Bands and that are all good, but I wasn't brought up like that. And the stuff that I actually genuinely love is the mountains and the sea and that kind of thing. And, even the other day I took the boys out nowhere, literally up the road, and took a gas cooker and cooked s'mores because it was like, at least you're out, But I don't need that much time to myself, I don't think,
And to be fair, mate, like, if I think back even to my childhood and some of the things that we did as kids, like we never had a lot of money or anything. And some of my fondest memories are the activities where you probably did just go up the road, packed a ham sandwich and whatever, and just kick the ball around the park. Like sometimes that's just the best thing. What kind of dad do you want to be? And
I mean, I try and be like my dad, I suppose, but different experiences in that. I guess I watched something where it was like, you want to be that person that I'd rather win their teams and they do something they shouldn't have done. They sneak out or they go to a party that they were told not to or they're too drunk or whatever. I want them to be able to call and be comfortable that they can come home and there's not really going to be, I'm not saying no consequences, but do you know what I mean? Like they can feel comfortable talking about it or whatever. Being like, I'm uncomfortable here. Like I want them to be able to call if it's 3 a.m. to know that they can still call dad and dad will just turn up. You'll talk about it in the morning kind of thing. You're safe for you. You know what I mean? Or if there's something you're uncomfortable with, I want to be able to talk about it. And, you'd hope that dad, I took this drug or something and I didn't like it. It was making me feel really sick and I felt pressured to want that kind of relationship.
Love it.
Safe, right?
I think it's great. Absolutely. What does a good day look like for you at the moment?
Any day, Golden Bay. But also just a day with the boys. We're usually out because if we're here, it ends up being housework and stuff. But just a day with Serena and the boys and being able to actually enjoy doing something. Spend a lot of time at Willowbank, but often that sans Serena because she's doing the housework and stuff. So it's just a day with the boys doing something and coming home and having a decent dinner. It would be out though, doing like a day at the beach or a day at making a fire somewhere or something like that.
So obviously this podcast is about navigating setbacks, and I think we've covered a lot of those things really well today. But what helps you come back to yourself when you feel like you're taking another hit or things are just really tough, like you were talking about earlier? How do you sort of recenter yourself and get out of that zone?
I think these little guys, like you don't have time to feel sorry for yourself, really. You just get to, he's coming in with his kite because he wants to go and play with his kite. Like, that's what it's about. You go, woe is me. Oh, okay, now I'm playing with a kite. Like, it just is what it is. So, yeah, that's kind of it, really. You snap back out of it from that. And I think I've been doing it so long, I can't even really explain it. And contextualize a lot of stuff too, right? Like, well, that was a shit day, but no one died. I'm learning to do that at work if you make a mistake. Like, oh my God, I'm the worst employee in the world. Oh, actually, did you bring down a company? Did you, like, no, just made a mistake. You know what I mean? Or even bad or anything, right? Like in life, worst husband in the world or worst dad in the world. Every dad in the world is probably shouting at their kid. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just calm down. So it's just that, like, checking on yourself and contextualizing, being like, well, it wasn't as bad as what some people would have it, or, maybe watch a video where you watch the people with the forklifts and they're pulling off a storage of drinks or something, and, the whole storeroom falls down. Well, not as bad as my day. I mean, my day wasn't as bad as that. So, yeah.
Prior to this chat, you said resilience is about gratitude, context, and understanding there's something more. What's the more for you?
I think more in life, as in there's like just because something goes wrong, like it just wasn't meant to be, like there's something else. You know what I mean? Or if you want it, just keep going. Something else will happen. Like in the end, it'll work out some way or other, and whether it's the way you want it, for the most part, you're still going to be here. And some of it's pretty crap and bad, yeah, but you still got a bit of life to live. So you've got to kind of like discover what that is. And I think, but the gratitude is the key piece, because it ties into that, where you go, like, I'm thankful that I got to have a bad day. Contextualizing, right? I'm thankful that I got to have an argument in a way. I'm thankful that my knee hurts, because at least I'm alive, and I'm alive and I'm in New Zealand, and, I look outside, I go fly the kite with the kid. There's no bomb going to fall on me anytime soon, and there's no, do you know what I mean? Like, you just contextualize it. And the more is the rest of life, right? Like, there's a guy, Mark Fetu, who was a climber on Everest, and was involved in an incident up there and lived through it, but he had to leave a friend who got, unwell when he couldn't get him down there. He was trying to speak with him for 2 nights, and they bivouacked out at 40 metres below the summit or something stupid like that. And he's still down, he's still trying to get him down, and the whole story about them convincing him that base camp to come down there. And he just says, one of the quotes he says at the end of the documentary is, he goes, it's not that life is that short, it's just that you're dead for a long time. So make the most of it. And if you end up being like, well, life is real short, which is what I've fallen into that trap of, because that's my natural thinking, right? Going on 50 is my natural thinking. Then I better fill up everything now. But it's now about kind of being like, well, actually, life isn't that short, mate. You're still, if you're lucky, you still have, several years left in you. You can take the time to do the stuff that might be the boring part, or the bit that is insignificant. And it's about learning that now. But that quote for me is like, there is something more, right? Like, it is long life. It's just, you're dead even longer. So make sure that the more is it, make sure you live it and experience everything, because there's always so much more you can experience.
If someone is listening to this episode when it comes out, and there's someone that's stuck in grief or stuck in loss, or just having a really difficult time being, or holding all the responsibilities that they are, whatever they may be, what would you want to tell them?
You're okay. You're alive. You're allowed to feel like that. It's shit, and there's no sugarcoating it. You just got to let it be shit. And you're allowed to have that breakdown, and you're allowed to, and you're allowed to, you're allowed to say that it's shit, and you're allowed to say that it's unfair. And whether it's the fact that someone's died, or this is that I always struggle with, people come to me, I don't want to tell you my issues because they seem so inconsequential. I go, well, shit, mate, I'm not like plenty of people have had worse than me. More people die, other people die, different periods. Like, you don't know anyone's story. Come to me if you're sad about the fact that you didn't get the job that you were, relying on because you got some financial issue or something that was going to be your way out, and you're feeling desperate about it. Go to someone about it. It doesn't matter. Like, that's your issue, and that's the issue that needs to be solved at the time. And the whole, problem halved is a problem solved is a problem halved. Just speak up about it. It's not something we do, and hopefully, it's becoming now, thankfully, something we do. But as in this podcast, right? But also, society's turning that way, where it wasn't. It wasn't like that. And it made it a lot harder. And so you just say it, do it. No one's going to hate you for it. In fact, probably the opposite, And actually, someone's going to go, oh my God, I thought I was the only one feeling that way.
You know what, mate, that's the one thing, like, I'm feeling more and more because, it's amazing how many people are going through the same things that you are. And I think the more you don't bring those things up, and not like I become very insular when I'm, I guess at my wit's end or at my worst anxious self. But you sort of tend to make that sort of inner dialogue and that story worse than it actually is. Whereas if you just put it out there, whether it's like yourself with Serena or me with Katie, or if you're talking to any of your mates, like, it's just better to say
what's going to happen.
Get it out there.
The people that don't like you are still going to not like you. Or they might help, And the people that do like you, what are they going to do? They like you already. So, if they don't, they're not worth really holding on to, are they? So I suppose that's it. And
Exactly.
the other thing I would say is that find something that's meaningful for you. Like, again, there's another, I'm a big philosopher, I suppose, do the quotes. And there's a, really famous quote by the great man Ali that, it's like service to others is the rent you pay for your room on earth. And you think of something like that and you go, well, giving is a good thing. It makes you feel good. And, if you reach out, giving isn't just giving money and time and stuff. It's giving yourself. And give yourself to people and say, this is me, and people go, and then they appreciate it. They go, I'm a lot clearer now on why you're completely stupid, or why you're like, why you are the way you are, why you take the hard way around things because that's the way your brain works, or why you don't take this bit of information in. I know now, that's why I'm so open about what's happened with my parents. It's my defense mechanism to say, look, this did happen. So if I'm a bit of a fuck up, this is why, kind of thing. And it's empowering,
Well, you're not a fuck up, mate. You're a wonderful human being, and I've always thought that. And obviously, we've been friends for a long time now, and I've certainly appreciated everything you've done for me, and I'm glad I got to learn more about your childhood today, because it's something we've never really discussed over the years. But who's someone that deserves a shout out for, I guess, making you who you are today?
Right. Obviously the parents, still, the influence was short but ongoing, if that makes sense. Or the time was, short but ongoing. And definitely the family now, Serena and definitely those two boys, as to maybe who I've become, for a bit of direction. And my close friends, people like yourself, people like the people that have contributed here, Sam and my family, obviously, Liz and Jules and Steve and the rest of my cousins and all of that. And I think lots of family friends. We're really lucky to have family friends and that, they all know who they are, and they've all played a massive part where we can just walk into their house like one of their own, if we need to. We know they're always there. And like I said, the guy from the boss from the supermarket, I would name him, but I don't know if he wants to be named. But he was a massive influence probably at the time that, I needed it most. So there's a lot of family friends that took me on more than they probably needed to, or, were obliged to. All of them, I suppose. Just everyone that I've sort of touched base with. And I reckon, other people that I've been inspired by, people like your old mate Keith, like the influence that someone like that has on your life, and you meet them and you go, holy shit, that's a whole different podcast on itself. This stuff happened around me, that stuff happened to him, and it's inspiring to see how he dealt with that, and you look at that and you go, that's an influence that I can just learn from,
Hey, thanks so much, man. It's been so good. I'll edit all the fuck ups out at the start with the audio issues and that. There's probably a kid there that just heard that, didn't they? But thanks for coming on the pod.